Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening and welcome to the Marshfield School Committee meeting on Monday, January 11th. Mrs. Pazerski, if you could please call the roll.
Ms. Boyd?
Here.
Mrs. Campbell?
Here.
Mrs. Brate?
Here.
Mr. Costello?
Here.
And Mr. Greer?
Mr. Greer, I believe, is joining us. I'm most likely having some technical difficulties. So if you could please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, folks, we're going to jump right into informational. I know we probably just have a few updates in this category, and then we have two agenda items tonight. So we'll go to Mr. Granatino first for the superintendent's informational update. Mr. Granatino.
Thank you, Mr. Costello. First off, can everyone hear me okay out there? I'm trying this headphone for the first time, so it looks like people can hear me. I see a thumbs up from Ms. Marple, so that's great. Thank you. My only superintendent update is just an update on the remote learning that we're in the middle of. We're just started week 2 of remote learning today. And I want to thank all of our staff, all of our students and their families for really making this remote experience a positive one. I know it was an abrupt change back on the night of the 3rd, but we rolled it out Monday and the staff hit the ground running. And I'm really, really impressed with everything that they've been able to do. Of all the things that have gone on this year, this is one of the areas that we've received a great deal of positive feedback, and I appreciate that from our stakeholders, whether it's our parents, our students, or our staff. Everyone has really been doing their best to engage both cohorts for the first time together. I mean, we've had pockets of it at the Daniel Webster and at the Furnace Brook earlier in the year, but to have the whole district on remote with late notice has really been impressive. And I've been into a number of the classrooms, both at the elementary, the middle, and the high school level, and I've seen the teachers who do come in, work on their remote experience with the students, and it's been nothing but positive. Just seeing the kids together and learning together and laughing and having fun with their peers in the other cohorts has been one of the biggest takeaways for me. But just the level of engagement, the level of instruction, has been really top notch, and I think that the experience has been positive for the students. To see the students laughing with each other as they're learning has been something that's been missing, I think, going all the way back to March 12th last year. So to see it, come to fruition so quickly, the plan that was in place was able to be, put into action within 12 hours time is really a testament to our teachers, their hard work, to our building principals and district-wide leaders who have made this happen. I want to thank them all. There's still a lot of work to do, and we're going to be continuing to work on it this week. I think some of the things that we'll be talking about in a little bit, this remote experience has been helpful in getting prepared for some of the changes that might be coming down the pike next week. So while we're happy with what's happened so far in the first week plus, we still have 4 more days that we want to make sure go well for our students, go well for our staff, and go well for our families. So again, thank you to all of our staff, all of our students, really just doing a great job with our remote experience. Again, I guess the goal to remember is that we do want to be back in person, in our hybrid model, at least to start off, get some instruction going on back in the buildings, and we need our numbers to come down. Again, I would love to be able to say that right now with 100% certainty we'll be back in our traditional model that we've been using for the year so far, starting next Tuesday after the holiday weekend. But we just have to still track the numbers. We have to look to see where we're at with cases. We have to look to see where we're at with staffing, if there's folks that are out. The one positive that's come out of cases that have come up in the last week is that there has been little to no contact tracing to have to take place because folks have been home. If we were in school with the numbers that we've seen, we might be looking at a number of other folks out either isolating or quarantining. As it stands right now, since I wrote to you folks last Sunday night on the 3rd, we've had 44 positive cases in the district. That's between students and staff. Combined right now, we have about 100 students and staff either in isolation or in quarantine. Now, a good chunk of those numbers will be gone by the time we were to return on the 19th, so that's positive. But we have to make sure that those numbers stay down. We have to make sure that people are social distancing and staying away from group gatherings, because just today, we had another 9 cases. So we want to see that go the other way and not continue to grow. The town, obviously, since the time we went remote as a district, the town itself shuttered its town buildings for public use. They still have employees going in to do some of the work, but they're not having visitors in many of the town buildings because of the numbers across the town. And yeah, I'm sure you've seen and heard of other districts as well that are going remote or have schools going remote based on the numbers. So we want to be back in next week. We're going to do everything we can. As of right now, I don't have a definitive answer, but I'd say by Thursday of this week, no later than Friday, we'll make an announcement for Tuesday. So we'll have some time to plan accordingly. But again, we just need to see those numbers go in the positive direction. Not that positive, the good direction positive. So that's all I have right now, Mr. Costello.
Thank you very much, Mr. Granatino. Much appreciated. Dr. Martin?
I will be updating with the agenda, so I'm all set.
Beautiful. Mrs. Scalaro?
I don't have very many updates since the last meeting, but I just want to echo what Superintendent Granatino said as far as the amazing work that's going on around the district. And I want to give a special shout out to all of the staff members that are coming in to the buildings to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students in preschool and the students with significant and complex needs. They're doing an amazing job. They're doing it safely. And students are getting what they need. So that's all. I just wanted to thank them.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Scalaro. Mr. Miller?
Yes, just one quick update. We'll probably touch upon this a little bit in the budget presentation as well, but I wanted to update the committee on the federal appropriation, the $900 billion appropriation. Just under 82 billion of that is going to education, and a little over 54 billion is going to K through 12 across the country. So that amount is going to be allocated the same as Title I is allocated, which means Massachusetts is receiving $815 million for K to 12. What does that mean for Marshfield? Right now, we've been told the amount would be approximately 3.7 times what we received in the initial CARES Act that we received last year. We received around 311,000 last spring. So if all goes according to plan, that would mean an additional $1.15 million, which would go a great, really help us out in the deficit that we have for this year. So we'll touch more about that in the presentation, but I just wanted to give an update on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Much appreciated. Just trying to, as we enter public comment, Mr. Granatino, I think I may have gotten kicked off of rights as a co-host. If you wouldn't mind just making me a co-host again.
I think I just put you back.
Awesome. Beautiful. There we go. You just did it. I'm going to go ahead and mute. Okay, so any subcommittee reports at this time for members of the committee? I don't believe there are any. Okay, seeing none, we're going to go into the portion of the meeting for public comment. So public participation, same as we have always done. If you would like to make a statement to the committee, and she's way ahead of me, please put your name in the chat and I will call on you in the order that you type your name. And I'm going to unmute now Mrs. Marples, Mrs. Sally Marples, you go right ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep my remarks brief. First of all, it is very heartening in this confusing time to have things have a certain normality, and having our school committee committed to doing what's best for the town of Marshfield and their students is a nice relief given all the confusion that we're living with right now. I was heartened, Jeff, by your opening remarks about our primary goal is to make sure we do what we do safely for the students and for the teachers. I don't know if people bother going on the Department of Health, but before coming on tonight, I went in and wanted to check numbers. And for once, Marshfield has high numbers that we wish we didn't have. According to the newest, at least that they posted for the period from 12/20 to to January 2nd, Marshfield had the unfortunate distinction of having 11.07 positivity rate, way above that 3% that was supposed to put us in the red when all this first started at the beginning of the year. The only local town around us that's doing worse than we are is Pembroke. So I understand where parents are really eager to have their children back in school, but with those kind of numbers, we really need to be extremely cautious. And I appreciate, Jeff, that you reiterated that for the staff and for our students. I think any plans going forward, and I just want to repeat what I said last week, one of the primary driving forces needs to be the protection, the physical, the health protection of our staff and our students. And again, this goes a long way to reaffirming our belief that this school district will do that and work and not take the easy way out, but rather take the best way out for everybody. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you again for being part of a normal supportive system that we all need right now. And everybody, have a good evening.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Marples. Much appreciated. Seeing no further public comment, I don't believe we have any of our student representatives with us tonight. If you do, we will circle back to you. Just send me a chat if you are here. But I did not see any of you on the list, which is understandable. There's a lot going on. We have 2 agenda items to jump into tonight, and then at the very end of the meeting, with the committee's consent, we'll rearrange the agenda just a little bit and do the minutes at the end, as we usually do. So we have 2 agenda items: the structured learning time revisions and the FY22 operating budget. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over now to Mr. Granatino and Dr. Martin for the structured learning time revisions. Dr. Martin, I know you'll be leading that conversation, so the floor is yours.
All right, can everyone hear me?
Mhm.
Hopefully. Okay, so Mr. Granatino, did you want to say anything first or
Yes.
jump right
Sure.
in?
Let me just, I think I'm unmuted there. I just wanted to say that, we obviously presented this last week, have made some tweaks to it based on some of the feedback that we received. And what we really want to do was just be able to present to you what the schedules could look like in our revised hybrid model. Again, we were looking at many of these changes later in the fall. And then obviously the state came forward with some of their recommendations as well and some new protocols that they wanted us to adhere to. So in combination of the two, we've put together a plan for the high school, the middle school, and the elementary that will increase that structured learning time, that live learning time at all levels. And tonight you'll be able to see just, not go into details that we did last week, but mainly just be able to show you the schedules and what it means for our students and some of the things that we have planned for the staff to put this into motion. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Martin now.
Okay, so just as a reminder, the Department of Ed, there it goes, their emergency regulations outlined what we needed to do. I think this is going haywire on me. So they called for a minimum of 35 hours of live instruction over a 10 school day period for our main model for the district, which in Marshfield, it is hybrid. The live instruction can be a combination of in-person and remote synchronous instruction. So what we are terming that, I guess the terminology that we will be using is really concurrent teaching and synchronous learning. So concurrent teaching is really when you're trying to teach the students in front of you, as well as having the students at home be kind of remoted in either via Zoom or Google Meet. And then synchronous instruction is what happens within that time as well. So the hours averaged between grades 1 through 12 is really that average is we want to hit that 35-hour mark. Pre-K and kindergarten are excluded, as I mentioned the other night. So the recommendations originally that I mentioned last week were for 6 to 12 really is to have students participate in their classes via Zoom or Google Meet for 42 minutes. Just a reminder, students wouldn't have to be on Zoom for that entire time. So a teacher might give a lesson to the entire group or have their students in front of them do something different while they give a lesson to the students at home. And then they can send them off to work on something and bring them back together to go over it, to share those types of things. On remote Wednesdays, the students will meet in all 8 of their classes. So they will have 15 minutes for each class. So that's just an additional time for teachers to touch base with their students, go over schedule, answer questions, reteach something if they notice that students are struggling with a certain concept. So our average that we were striving for was a little over 39 hours of structured learning time over the course of 10 days. So putting together, well, elementary, same kind of situation, but we wanted to make sure we kept that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday cohort in place. Again, students can be on Zoom for part of it, probably a mini lesson, and then go off, do some work, come back with their teacher. So I want to just present some schedules that we developed. And then I'll go back to kind of filling in some questions that also came up through the task force. So this is the high school revised hybrid schedule. So as you can see, the students will log in and Zoom with their classes 42 minutes, a minimum of 42 minutes. So again, that some teachers might have more activities for students to do or a longer lesson, but the minimum is 42 minutes. It's, again, part of that time will be teaching, explicitly teaching from the teacher, and then the rest might be some synchronous learning opportunities. Go try this activity, do this assignment, come back, and that would rotate through the entire day of a student's remote days. Of course, the typical, if you're in person on those days, then of course you follow your regular schedule. And then if you notice on Wednesdays, we're really looking at having teacher prep time start first thing in the morning, and then starting at 8 o'clock on the Wednesdays is when the students at the high school would cycle through all of their blocks for 15 minutes. So they would go to A block, B block, and so on for 15 minutes. And then the rest of that day would be some asynchronous work beyond what would normally be done in class. So that is really the revised schedule that we are looking at for the high school. Middle school, you'll see, looks very similar. The difference with the middle school really is on the Wednesdays, they felt it was more important to have students not cycle through continuously with all of their classes. So they kind of broke it up. So they have a couple of check-ins at 8 o'clock and 8:15, and then a block of time where that would be independent work or some extra help sessions offered. Then at 9:15, they would cycle through their next 2 classes and kind of go through. So they're not continuously on Zoom for 2 hours straight. So that they felt that was important at the middle school for those students. They are, again, keeping some extra help times in there because they did feel that that was important for their students as well. So both middle school and high school will have about 39 hours of structured learning time over the 10 days, which gives us above and beyond the 35 required hours. And we also have the requirement of having times with the students who are remote every single day. All right, so elementary. This one is a little bit more difficult to explain unless you are in an elementary classroom and you understand the scheduling, because this is just a sample. So we actually took off the times. If you look on the left-hand side of the screen, we took off the times and we just put in like the time frame, the number of minutes that each activity would most likely be, so that not all students have a specialist at the end of the day, as this schedule shows. Some students have specialists first thing in the morning, so the morning meeting would be a little bit later in the morning after the specialist. So these will be different based on the specific classroom schedule that the teachers are following. So basically what we have is the morning meeting and word work, phonics, or possibly in grades 3, 4, and 5, something a little bit different instructionally, but that would happen concurrently. So the students for 45 minutes would be Zooming in if they're at home, and the students would also in class be doing the same thing with their teacher. So the morning meeting would be for both cohorts. So if you look at Monday, cohort A would be in person, cohort B would be remoting into the classroom during that time. And so all of the students would be in that morning meeting together. And then the word work and phonics, it's up to the teacher. Like they might keep them together. They might keep the students on Zoom. They might be doing small group. But that would be a concurrent time as well, where the students at home would be either on Zoom or Google Meet for that time. And then you have your typical readers workshop, independent reading, those types of activities. Again, the blue is for Monday, cohort A is in person, cohort B, those are your asynchronous lessons in your work that you would be doing at home. So when we get to our math lesson, at the elementary level, we talked about starting this a little bit slowly, and if all goes well, we could possibly expand this to include more than math. But where the teachers have never taught this way before, we felt that it was really important for us to get it right and to have some time to really hone in on best practice for concurrent teaching. So we looked at all of the different content areas, and because math really is important, it's more important the pacing of math, because lessons build on each other. Skills build off the previous lessons or the previous units. And it would be a better idea to keep classes on the same pace in math. So that is why we have chosen math to be the concurrent content area for right now. So when students are either in person or remote during that math time, that could include mini lesson, some instruction. Again, the teacher could say, okay, now I want you to go practice this. Now that could be they're having the students in front of them practice, or they could be they're having the students that are remote do some practice. There could be collaborative activities. So whether they're doing a Jamboard or Pear Deck or something like that, it could be collaborative. They could be playing a game. They could be doing a thumbs up, thumbs down so that everyone on the Zoom can see what's going on. They could be having small groups, conferring with certain students, and then wrapping up at the end of that block. So all of those things could be happening. So it's not that a student who is remote would be, that teacher would not be talking at them for a full 60 minutes. It would be more of a smaller lesson and then some instructional best practice that we would do in a classroom with these students. Then later, some of the teachers would have a live session with students just at home. So checking in with the remote students, at some point during the day, just with the remote students by doing a Zoom or a Google Meet. And then the other difference would be that on one of their remote days, the students at home would participate in their specialists concurrently. So, again, that could include some instruction. They're giving a basic overall lesson at the beginning and then asking the students to practice or demonstrate some learning. So in art, they might be asking the students to put what they just learned into a project or work on a project, do some activities, and then wrap up at the end. The tricky part of the specialists will be where they are located. So for example, PE, we have outside as much time as possible. And so they might be in one field one day and another field another day, and they might be moving around. So it might be more difficult for some of our content areas to do this, the same as would happen at the middle and high school for some certain classes. So we have to keep in mind that, again, this is an average, and we will do this as much as possible with our specialists, but there might be limitations to some of those times. So right now our students are cycling through their specialists for 3-week periods. So they would get specialists, but it might be that it's just going to look a little different depending on the content area. Wednesdays would be the same as it is right now. So all students would have a live remote session with their teacher, and we did put math on here so that they can keep on the same pace as they have been doing all along. And then they would also have their specialist, as they do right now, for 30 minutes of a live remote session. And then the other work for that day would be asynchronous work or activities that the teacher has assigned to them. And then Wednesdays would continue to be the early release day at either 12:45 or 1:15, depending on which school. So those are the sample schedules. I want to go back for a minute just to look at some of the questions that we had come up at the task force that we're working through. And these questions were actually on the PowerPoint unanswered last week. So the questions about, I covered kind of the content areas to be taught concurrently. So grades 6 to 12, the goal is to have them all. But again, as you see in the second question, some of those classes might need some flexibility in that amount of time that they are actually being taught concurrently or zooming into their classes. So in grades 1 through 5, the goal is to do math and morning meeting as concurrent, and then your specialists as well. So one question that has come up is about the Wednesdays, the meetings, the PD, how can we keep providing collaboration and planning? Because again, this is a different way of teaching. It's not remote teaching, and it's not face-to-face teaching. It's a mix of both. So teachers are going to need some support and some assistance and PD. So we are looking at switching all of our PD to really focus on the concurrent teaching model and the technology that might be needed with the assistance of our digital learning coaches and our innovation specialists. We have met with them already to talk about some ideas moving forward. And then utilizing other staff to support the model, especially when students are in a remote session and zooming into their classroom, do we have other staff that can help with those students at home while the teacher is supporting the students in front of them, or vice versa? So we are still investigating some possibilities on how we can best utilize our staff to do that. Students with IEPs and 504s will continue to receive their necessary services. So regardless, even if there's a schedule change or something like that, the students will still receive their services. So if there are any changes necessary, those will be made and communicated to the families. And then the best practices, we're really looking at that concurrent teaching model. So our DL coaches, innovation specialists, Amy McAlpine and myself are taking a kind of a part 2 of Catlin Tucker's course that we took earlier in the fall, where she talks a lot about more remote practices and concurrent teaching practices and how we can use some of those to share out to our other colleagues. And then technology, I know Dave Cawthorn has been walking around classrooms. Some of our innovation specialists have been walking around classrooms even prior to this to just look at how the technology is set up and how can we use what we already have, such as our webcams, our document cameras and Elmo's projectors. How can we use this in order to support this model? And then we will have kind of some basic setups and ways that teachers can utilize the technology that they have at hand. And then attendance, requirements for students and expectations for camera use, et cetera. We are working on this, but this model does lend itself to really gauging student attendance and engagement much more directly than we have been doing. So we are working on exactly what those requirements and expectations will be. And then the communication to students and families. I think we've talked about having a district-wide message, but then individual classroom schedules, of course, will be shared by the individual teachers. So kind of having a multitude of ways of communication about what these changes entail. And that communication will include some of these other bullet points about attendance, expectations, those types of things, so that students and families aren't caught off guard as to what is expected, because it is going to look different and the expectations are going to be different. So I think that was really all for right now. I can stop sharing. And I know that was quick, but I did share the schedules with the staff before this meeting, this PowerPoint, so they also have it. But I don't know if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions.
If you don't mind, Mr. Costello, I'll just quickly add to Dr. Martin's comments. Thank you, Dr. Martin. And I want to thank the task forces. I mean, we had two groups working elementary and secondary, and a lot of these ideas obviously came from their hard work, from their insight, both as classroom teachers, as parents, as administrators, trying to put together the best plan possible to not only meet the expectations that we had for ourselves, but also to meet the expectations of the state. This is something, as we talked about last week, that we need to do. All the districts in the state have to be at these numbers. So while it might have changed some of the ideas that we were looking at already based on feedback we got from families and from staff and from students back in the fall, what you have here addresses those ideas as well as meets the requirements of the state. I just want to add too that when you look at the elementary schedule, I don't want people to be concerned, and I know Dr. Martin mentioned that they were just putting the time frames in there though, but as you've seen again, this remote experience has been helpful because a lot of the same activities and the way it's rolling out are very similar here in the remote to what we'll be doing in this new revamped hybrid. But almost all of the teachers individually, based on the model that we had for our hybrid level or our remote instruction, put in their own timeframes for each of the activities. So before we roll this out on Tuesday, that will be getting shared with all the students and their families well in advance, so that they know when they'll have to be on the computer, when they won't have to be on the computer, that type of thing. And just want to see if there's any other quick points I want to note. Again, rolling it out on the 19th, I know a lot of folks had questions as to whether or not we were going to wait until after the semester ended and then start it up. But we really had to start on the 19th, as that is when the state wants it to be implemented. And if the hours moving forward from the 19th aren't met, then we could find ourselves having to make up these hours at the end of the school year. So we're trying to avoid that. And I talked to a few other superintendents who are in the same boat, and they were also rolling things out on the 19th. So we will have time this week, again, to experiment with some of the strategies folks may be using next week. There's some PD that's already put in place, our innovation specialist, and I know Amy McAlpine's out there somewhere in the room. Her and her team of folks have already been working on tools that the teachers will be able to use, and I think that's going to be accessible for our staff this coming Wednesday when they have time to do a little PD work and collaborate with their peers. So it's gonna, just like the remote rolling out this past week, there might have been a few bumps and bruises very early on. I think people took to it pretty quickly though, and I'm confident that our staff and our teachers, our support staff, our administrators are going to make sure that these new revisions to the hybrid model are going to be able to be enacted in smooth fashion starting next week.
Thank you very much, Mr. Granatino. Appreciate that as well. Any members of the committee have questions or comments that they would like to mention? Ms. Campbell, you are recognized.
Thank you. And thank you for that presentation, Dr. Martin. I just wanted to reiterate, because my phone has pinged twice since Dr. Martin's presentation, and clarify again for parents that the elementary school schedule that was shown was a sample. And your child's schedule is not necessarily going to look exactly like that. Just so people know that that's clear. And then just again, along with what Mr. Granatino expressed earlier in the meeting, just tremendous gratitude for our teachers for being able to pivot and really do an incredible job. My 2 girls' teachers are amazing, and I know that their teachers are not the exception, but they are the norm of the teachers that we have in our district. So just a big thank you to them.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Well said. Any other questions or comments? I'm sorry, Dr. Martin, did you want to reply to that? Just to reiterate.
There was one thing, just if I can just say one quick thing. I noticed, as I'm sitting here, I noticed a little bit of a mistake on the elementary schedule, just because that 60 minutes of lunch recess is where the live time with the teacher would come in, because the teacher can't have a live session with the students at home and do writer's workshop in the classroom. So again, just a little bit of a move there, because it would be more typical that the teacher would have lunch and then during recess time, that's when they would Zoom with their students, or they would do it before school. So just a quick little thing there. And Ms. Campbell is absolutely right. It is just a sample. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. Ms. Brate, I see you have unmuted yourself, so go ahead.
Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me? Yes, okay, great. So student engagement and the sign-on rate, I heard you talk about that a little bit. Have you seen an improvement over this time that we've been remote? I heard you say that you wanted to, wait and see what that looked like. And I'm just curious as to what it was compared to what it was in the hybrid model before.
Do you mean actual data of how many students have logged in, that type of?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think, we haven't run those numbers yet.
Okay.
To see about exact logins, and it's pretty intense when you do. I think we probably would look at the attendance to see how many students have been virtually present versus absent during the times at the middle and high school. And then elementary, we could check and see how many kids have logged into the Zoom. It's a little bit trickier because they have multiple times that they log in at elementary, and it's not the same way of taking attendance as you would in a high school class. So
right.
I think overall, from what I'm hearing, students are logging in, they are showing up. It's funny because they need to show up on time, and sometimes they're late, but at least they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a work in progress, even as far as monitoring the difference right now between students who logged in during the optional times versus now. But I can pretty much guess that it's going to be more consistent right now of students actually being on those Zoom sessions.
That's what I was guessing. And the reason I brought it up is because I think that we've been discussing how the structure is important for kids. And I know that feedback that I've received from parents and teachers, it seems that in this remote model, it's just it's easier for the parents to keep track, for the kids to keep track when they have an exact time, when they have to be there. So I was just curious, and I'd be curious to see those numbers when you have them. Yeah. My next question is actually the same as Kendra's, but I was actually going to ask for the teachers. She had mentioned the parents, wondering if that was a sample schedule. Just from a teacher's perspective, I'm curious as to what the expectations are the expectations that they follow that exact schedule, and where do the differences come in? And I just want to make sure that they have clear direction on what's expected of them.
So the teachers would be expected to have this amount of time. So they would be expected to have a morning meeting with both classrooms or both cohorts at the same time, and do some other instructional activity. So for example, K1 and 2 have foundations. So grades 1 and 2, that would be a good fit to do that. But grades 3 and 4 and 5 don't do foundation. So they might do something else during that block of time. So, and then the math is the content area that we are expecting the teachers to try to do this with at least first before jumping into anything else, because we want to make sure that we have best practice as far as even the technology use before we expand this into any other content areas. So math is the content area that we would expect to see this type of teaching. And then the specialists as well, that would be the expectation for that.
Okay, and then just one follow-up question to what you said. So if math is the try time, how long is that try period? And how long are you going to let that go before you either add something or make changes?
I think we have to give it a couple of weeks before we would kind of come back together and regroup and see if we want to make any changes or shifts. I don't expect that we would shift away from math. It would be probably adding something instead of shifting away from it. But again, I think we need to make sure that this is working for the teachers and the students, even the technology wise, and making sure that it's a good fit for the pacing and to keep kids on pace. So I would expect at least a couple of weeks of trying this out, maybe, and then we just regroup with the teachers and see how it's going.
And I think it's important to note that, and Ellen did say it, that, we wouldn't be looking to pull back from that. I mean, math is the one that, the team felt best to go forward with to start off. But if reading and writing can be added in there as well, that's what we're looking at in 2 weeks' time to see, if the amount of live time with the students and teachers are appropriate. It's not overburdening them. If we've heard anything this week, and it's not even a negative, but it's been a shift for the amount of time that students have had to be, especially at the lower levels, that have had to be on Zoom. And they love it. Like we talked about earlier, they love interacting. They love being with the teacher. They love being with their peers, but it's been a lot for some of them. So that's why we didn't go with both to start off. But we will, see how it works with the amount of hours that we have now for live direct instructional time. And then if we can add to it, we will add to it, but we're not going to be looking to pull back from that.
And that's a good point, Mr. Granatino, is that, we might stick with just one content area for the lower grades and add something for grades 3, 4, and 5 who can handle more Zoom time. Like, I don't think it's a set that we have to do the same for all the grade levels. I think we're just starting at this place as a starting point, and then we'll go from there and see, making sure that this amount of time is appropriate. If it's too little, if it's too much, we just want to gauge that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brake. Ms. Boyd, go right ahead. So you unmuted yourself there.
Yes, thank you. And I also want to thank all of the teachers for your hard work and for adapting so quickly. I've heard a lot of great positive feedback from the parents that have reached out to me about this week in particular, or last week. So thank you very much for all of your work there. Sticking with elementary school just for a little bit, I'm thinking about parents who have, multiple elementary age kids at home, maybe also balancing work full time. And I understand the sample schedule. I understand teachers will have their own schedules, but will those schedules be fixed, I guess, sort of for the days or for the week, so that families can plan and know that, at this particular time of day, we need to make sure we're, logging in. It will just be sort of consistent so families can then balance their other responsibilities.
Yes, for the most part, an elementary teacher's schedule runs pretty much the same. So they'll have a specialist at the same scheduled time and those types of things. And they usually, if they tend to do math in the afternoon, that's usually when they do math, and it stays a little consistent. Almost like what you're seeing now. I think most of the teachers have a pretty good paced out schedule with exact times that students are to log on. So that would be the goal, is to get it as consistent as possible, because we know that parents have multiple students that they're going to have to keep track of at this point. And especially those students who might be at the Boys and Girls Club, we want to make sure that there's some consistency there as well. So yes, that's something that we will keep our eye on.
Great. My other question, I noticed in the revised Wednesday schedule then for the high school in particular, if a student needed extra help, did I miss it? Is it built into that Wednesday still? I know we've built in some live instruction time in that Wednesday? Or is that something that they would just approach their teacher for, independently?
So I think teachers right now are offering those extra help sessions, even though it's not on a schedule. I think there are many teachers that if they know a student is struggling, they'll say, hey, I'm here and I can meet with you at such and such a time. I don't, it's not necessarily blocked in here, but I don't think that means it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That is a conversation I certainly can have with Mr. Kuther, and make sure that there is some time for students to be able to check in.
Yeah, and I think as long as, whatever the solution is, I think as long as everybody knows that is how you go about getting extra help if you want it.
Yep.
And then the only other question I have is really probably more directed at Superintendent Granatino. And it's, as we look to return, so this is the hybrid model. So going back to some of your earlier comments in the informational session, do you have a target metric in mind that you're watching? Like, what, I know you said you want the piece numbers to come down and you're watching the numbers of quarantine, but do you have is there sort of a baseline target or anything that you're looking at, or does it really just depend on where the cases are in the community, or whether or not they're in the school community or just sort of in the larger town community? I think he's still muted.
How about now? There we go. All right. Okay. Dawn over Marblehead. To the point of, the metric of what we're looking at, it's kind of a combination of those cases. Again, we had a large, influx of cases prior to coming back. And while the numbers have continued to grow over the past week plus, there's obviously no close contact. So we're not seeing it spread and having large numbers out. Although there are, as I said, a little over 100 students and staff that are out either quarantining or isolating. But if we get to a point where the numbers are coming down, and most importantly, if we have the staffing that can still allow us to manage the schools, then I'd be looking to have us come back. So I don't have a set number. I guess you kind of see it, you know it when you see it, and we'll be tracking them each day here. And if we see the numbers dip, if we see the ability for our staff to fully, manage our school, then I think we're in a good position. It might also be that, I'm going to take a closer look that if we have an issue and it's in one specific school, I'm not going to be looking to see that the whole district, unless the numbers across the town are just surging. But if we see that it's focused in one school, we'll probably, approach it that way and take a look at that school as opposed to the whole district. But our goal is to get folks back in the building next Tuesday by any way we can. But obviously we want to do it safely, as I said. And again, we'll be working with the Board of Health, and I'll be talking to you folks before we do anything along those lines again. But I'm confident by Thursday, no later than Friday, we'll be able to let folks know where we're at for the 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Boyd, I don't know if you saw Mrs. Marble's comment. Thank you, Mrs. Marbles. Reminding us that the academic labs will still be running for students who need them. And we also still continue to have our math program too. So those are a couple of other supports that students would have.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, folks. Before we move to a vote on this, I just have a couple quick things I want to add. I think first and foremost, folks know that in a situation like this, our hands are tied. Of course, the state has passed down some new requirements that we have to abide by. And I want to make sure that I clear up a misconception that has been out there. And obviously there's, my colleague, Mr. Greer here has been railing against state unfunded mandates and mandates from the state for years. And this is yet another one of those that we see. And I got a nice email today. I've gotten a lot of emails from parents, as the rest of the committee has, from folks the last couple of weeks, letting us know, especially this last week, just how much they appreciate the efforts of our teachers during a fully remote period, as well as the efforts of the teachers throughout the rest of the year. And I got a nice one today that said they appreciated the teachers in Marshfield and the staff trying their best to implement a new and innovative way of education during an unprecedented time. And that's a really important thing to note. I also want folks to be assured that the thing that's really, kind of got me all hot and bothered over the entire process of this is seeing some comments online or wherever it may be of folks that think that the schools are only making these changes just because the state's telling them to. And I want to make sure folks know that we literally got this news about the state handing down new mandates. And Dr. Martin, you remember this? In the middle of a task force meeting to talk about how we could do things differently. We implemented a new and innovative way of education that our teachers came up with. And when this committee voted for the hybrid model, we did so putting our faith in the educational professionals that we have here in Marshfield, from our leadership all the way down, and especially in those folks who gave up so much time and effort to contribute to the process of coming up with those plans. Seeing folks say that we're only making these changes, or we only started making these changes because the state told us to, is just false. We implemented these new changes. We stuck with them for a month, maybe a little longer. We did a survey of the community. We see the valuable numbers that came from that survey. There was a split for sure. There was a good amount of people who it was working for. There was some people who needed some changes to be made. So this administration put together those task forces once again and started to look through how we could make changes to the model that would work for our education here in Marshfield. So I want to thank the administration for doing that and for being proactive about that. And I want to thank the teachers and the staff and the parents and the volunteers. I know we have Megan Hayes, I believe, is on this Zoom now, a student who participated in that process and gave a lot of time to that process. In the middle of that process, our ability to choose for ourselves how to make those changes was taken away from us. So I want to make sure folks know that this administration and the teachers and the school committee members have heard your calls. For those of you who have said things need to change, we're working our hardest to make sure that we're serving as many students as ably as possible. That is the goal of Marshfield Public Schools. That goal has never changed, despite the fact that we're in a global pandemic. In fact, we have seen people get even more committed to that goal. I want to make sure folks know that. I want to thank everybody who participated in that. I was saying earlier today to Mr. Greer that hindsight's 2020. We look back on some things that may have not worked as well. We look back on some things that we wish we could have emphasized a little more. That's normal in an unprecedented time. We own that. We have to own that. But I will rest easy tonight. I will rest easy tomorrow. I will rest easy 10, 20 years from now, knowing that every single person who was involved with this process made every decision that they made with the students of Marshfield at the forefront of their minds. So when we take this vote today, I hope folks remember that. I hope folks know that this district is working as hard as we possibly can to make sure that we're serving all students. And I felt that that was important to say before we move on. So Mr. Granatino and Dr. Martin, before we entertain a motion, would just like to know if anybody would like to add anything final that you feel would be beneficial for the committee to know.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I couldn't, I was hearing. So if we had any final comments, just to, again, to reiterate what you were saying real quickly, there have been a lot of folks that have been involved in this process, and I want to thank all of them. It's not been easy. Again, we had a plan that was worked on for a while. It had to be tweaked. We knew that it was going to, looking at the feedback we were getting from folks, that we wanted to make some revisions. But again, remember, that plan was a plan that was not only supported here, but it was supported by DESE. And a lot of the input that we got was from information that we garnered from DESE. So them making the changes, again, did put us in a bit of a different direction, but we were heading down that path regardless. And we'll go forward with this plan like other districts, increase that student learning time, that live learning time. And again, I'm confident that our staff, who are the best around, I would rather have no one else leading this charge than the teachers of Marshfield and the administrators and building principals of Marshfield. I'm confident that we'll be able to make these changes as we move forward. And again, as we keep at the end of the tunnel, that goal of trying to get everybody back in the building as best we can in a safe fashion at some point in time. But this will get us to that point.
Agreed, Mr. Granatino. Thank you very much. That all being said, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think the best note to end on is that I have no greater faith in any group in the world than our teachers here in Marshfield to implement these new plans, and appreciate all the work they've done thus far and all the work they'll continue to do for our students. Mr. Greer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of what we're here to do tonight as an interim control, and I don't like to nitpick on words, but just to my point of view on what the Superintendent Granatino said, as opposed to some point in time, I want to get these kids back in the school as soon as possible. Not some, vague date on the horizon, right? We're actively working to get these kids back in the school now, and we're going to continue to work on that. And I just want to say I'm going to support this tonight as an interim control, by no means a permanent solution. That's all.
Thanks, Mr. Greer, and would like to say too that I know Mr. Granatino, as these task forces wrap up the important work that they've done, I do believe, and I know we have a meeting next week, that you'll be coming to us with a proposed timeline on what, if those changes were to be made that the task forces have come up with, what that timeline would look like specifically. So it's important, Mr. Greer, I agree that we have all the data and that we know specifics, and I know, Mr. Granatino, that you agree with that, sir, to ensure that we have all the data possible as we look at those decisions as well. So thank you, Mr. Greer. That all being said, any member of the committee have a motion at this time? A motion to approve the updated hybrid model. Mr. Greer, is that motion made? Motion's been moved by Mr. Greer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Campbell. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, that's 5-0-0. Thank you, folks. Again, thank you to the committee. Thank you to the administration, but just special shout out to the committee. As soon as that pandemic hit, I think we all knew that we were in a position where we wouldn't be making decisions that everybody would be happy with universally for a long, long time. So thank you all for your work on that, your diligence on that. Appreciate all your work and the work of our administration and our teachers. Next up, our second item of business is the FY22 operating budget. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over now to Mr. Granatino, who I know will then turn it on over to Mr. Miller to talk about the FY22 budget. Go ahead, Mr. Granatino.
Okay, thank you. I will do our traditional first read presentation on the FY22 budget. Again, we take no offense if some of you who have been out there looking at what we're doing with our hybrid model choose to head home so you can be with your family or friends or do some work or just relax. That's okay if you want to jump off the Zoom. It's not as scintillating, I think, as the earlier discussion.
But nonetheless, it's exciting.
It's important. It's important. This is Tom's Super Bowl, so we like to really.
It is not this year.
So I'm gonna walk us through a PowerPoint. It's a little shorter than maybe some from the years past, and kind of look at where we're at FY21, moving into FY22, and the collaboration that we've been able to have with the town, which has been phenomenal. And I'll get into that in the middle of the discussion. So just give me 1 second as I try to share this page here. And I'm still a neophyte sometimes when it comes to all this stuff. Okay, so I want to look at sharing screen, and that's what I want to see there. And I want to see this here. Okay, everyone see that? All right, and we're going to go to presentation. Okay, so FY22 budget. Again, this is for the 21-22 school year. Again, what's driving us, as always, when we're making our decisions, is that idea of every student, every day, whatever it takes. The annual budget, and let me just get this out of my page because it's blocking my view. The annual budget, as I say every year, is the financial expression of the educational programming of the school department, and it mirrors the problems and difficulties that confront the school system. I'm sorry. The superintendent, oops, 1 second there, sorry, I hit it on automatic. Okay, the superintendent shall present each year to the school committee an administrative budget proposal for the fiscal year. This budget will be developed based on the school committee goals set forth prior to the budget development by the administration. The proposal shall be comprehensive, and shall contain detailed backup material satisfactory to the committee. That's where Mr. Miller's big book comes in play. These are the members of the administrative team that work throughout the year. We have a few new folks there. Ms. Coots, our ECC director. Obviously, Joni Pazerski, my new assistant, is in the mix, but all of our building principals, our central office leaders have been a part of this process as we move forward throughout the summer and into the year. Obviously, on the budget subcommittee are Mr. Costello, Ms. Stetson Campbell, myself, Dr. Martin, Ms. Galara, and Mr. Miller. This gives a good ballpark view of where we've been with the budget over the last 10, 12 years. And again, back in the earlier years, the numbers weren't increasing greatly, but in the last five, 6 years, those numbers have increased. And that's been, I think, due in large part with the collaboration that we've had with the town, with Mr. Maresco, Mr. Della Russo, their financial team, myself, and Mr. Miller have worked with them over the years to really build up a good relationship in that we're looking to not only do what's best for the town, but what's best for the district and what's best for the taxpayers. And along the way, we've been aided by all of the members of the committee, either as financial team members or just folks that have wanted to sit down and get a better idea of what the budget looks like. But this past year, what we're working on is FY21 is a 2.56% budget, which we received last spring. Because of the fact that the town was able to be so supportive of us, there were a number of things that we were able to do with those dollars. We met the contractual obligations of our collective bargaining agreements. We've never had to go back and ask for more money after the budget's been settled to pay our collective bargaining agreements. And I think that's something that's really important to us. I know it's something that Mr. Miller strives to work towards every year. Full day kindergarten has become the norm now in Marshfield, and we've been able to fund it fully. We've been able to meet the COVID challenges. We've talked at earlier meetings this year to express how much we've had to spend. A lot of the monies that we've spent on COVID-19 on the pandemic have been from state and federal dollars, but a lot of it is from our budget here, the existing budget, and as well as the supplementary dollars that we received at the special town meeting in the fall, all of which have allowed us to meet these needs under these unprecedented times. We've increased nursing coverage across the district, which was one of the bigger tasks at hand as we want to open the building safely. We also added staffing and hours at the custodial level to make sure that our buildings were as clean and sanitized as possible. We've restored general and instructional supplies at all levels, and we were able to increase our annual technology expenditures, which allowed for us to have our one-to-one renewal, which in turn allowed us to be better prepared for this pandemic with the idea of students having to learn not only in school, but at home at the same time. And in some cases, like we have this week, where they're all learning at home, having those one-to-one renewals has been a huge bonus for us and for our students. Also, as I mentioned, at the fall town meeting, typically we don't have a lot of items at the fall town meeting, but again, in working with Town Administrator Maresco and his financial team, Patrick Della Russo, and others, we identified a number of areas where they were able to assist us through the special town meeting process. We were able to garner through free cash and grant monies for our 2 additional school resource officers that are now in place, both at the middle school and at the elementary levels. There was $500,000 in free cash that we were able to garner to help us again with extra COVID costs. There was another $200,000 that I forget the exact amount on the town side, but there was both sides received some monies to go towards our maintenance funds, and $200,000 went to our school maintenance, which again helped us with many of the projects that are ongoing throughout the district. We were able to expand town-wide Wi-Fi, which again helps us immensely, especially as we go down this road now of this modified hybrid learning, where there's going to be that concurrent learning going on. To have a more stronger, emboldened Wi-Fi capacity is going to help us greatly. There's also $100,000 in bond premiums that came back our way from past projects, again going straight to our maintenance of our buildings. And then there was one article for monies that will go towards us looking to replace the AC system at the Furnace Brook Middle School, which has been on our list of capital items for some time now. So we have done very well through the largesse of the town, and I want to thank all of our citizens who have supported us, those that go to town meeting and go through these motions and support the schools. It is greatly appreciated, and we can't do what we do in our classrooms without this support. Moving forward, Again, as we put our plans together, we look at the 5 pillars of our strategic plan, which are in our curriculum, instruction, social emotional learning, community, and learning environments. So everything that we try to do, and again, some years we can do more than others. We can't always get exactly what we need, but this is what drives us. When there's something that we point to, why are we asking for X? It's tied somewhere back to the strategic plan. And I think the committee has, even before I got here, has always tied their budget process to what's best for the strategic plan of the district. And we're able to make changes to our financial plan and the items within them as they pertain to the strategic plan and make sure that we're trying to continually move forward. And as I said, sometimes we can move forward a little faster. This coming year, as I'll get to in a moment, we're probably not going to be able to take as many things off that financial plan as we'd like. But again, we're in some pretty unique circumstances right now. But we'll talk about that in one moment. Again, the big difference between our budgets, some folks do a level service budget, which is just what you have now is what you have tomorrow with the fixed cost built in, whether it's salaries, whether it's contracts. But you're kind of looking at the same thing this year that you had last year, but you're just covering the increase in costs that are associated with that. The needs-based budget is something that we've always worked on here and pushed for. And I think the town appreciates knowing that we're always, trying to improve and trying to increase the resources for our staff and for our students. And at times that's going to cause the budget to go up beyond those costs that I talked about, whether it's the contractual obligations, the salary increases, steps and lanes, all those types of things that are tied into a budget. We sometimes want to go beyond that. And we've been able to make gains in our financial plan and in our needs-based requests each year. What we're looking at right now for FY22 in a nutshell is where we start off is the FY21 budget number of 51 million. That's what we started the year with. Mr. Miller, while it's not a 100% certain number, what we've been looking at is for projected salary increases, including attrition, on a word that we've heard for folks that might be moving on at the end of the year, is an increase of another 900,000. There are estimated operational increases. Some of those are, transportation contract and some other items that are going to be there are out of district placement for vocational schools. So that number falls in there, and that's an increase of about $100,000. There's also money that we are using from circuit breaker to help offset the FY21 deficit. Because again, I think it was back in early November, Mr. Miller talked to the committee here, and we've talked to the town side as well about the overages of the FY21 budget due to the COVID crisis and the monies that we've had to spend on remote learning, on additional staffing, on people that have taken leaves, on just COVID PPE materials beyond what we've received from grants. And we're looking at having to take about $1 million out of the circuit breaker to help meet those needs this year, as well as utilization moving forward in FY22, looking at a decrease of $433,000 from circuit breaker. So the proposed level service budget, again, we talked about needs-based budget and level service. We're really looking at a level service budget of $52,577,000. Right now in this plan, there is not any of the items from the financial plan ticked off or part of this number. One of the reasons is because we do know that while the collaboration from the town has been great, and we have a pretty firm number of 3% that the town is willing to push our way in the budget process, and they've already presented their first read of their budget a week ago. They'll be voting on theirs, I think, well, probably tonight, because they meet either tonight or maybe next week. I think it's next week they're meeting, and they'll be voting on the number. But this increase would cover all of our costs. And again, if things change over, between January and the end of the school year, especially around town meeting time, and we can move some of those dollars once we get more concrete numbers on salary, on attrition, on some of the other costs, we might be able to take some things off. And I'll show you what that list of items are on this year's financial plan. But as of right now, we'd be looking at a 3% increase, looking to make a request for a 3% increase, which would cover our operational cost in our level service budget. And again, 52,577 would be a 3% increase. The average increase that we've had since FY10 has been 2.33%. So this is, and that's usually after we've come in with our needs-based budget and there's negotiations back and forth we've averaged at 2.33. Here we already have a hard commitment of 3% from the town side, which would be one of our higher increases in the time that I've been here. Town-wise, the overall FY22 budget that Mr. Maresco presented the other day for the whole town, the town side and the school side, was a 2.8% increase. And on the town side increases, they were looking at a 2.76 increase. So we'd be, at this point in time, receiving a bit of a larger increase than the town is receiving in the FY22 budget. Again, what the committee has worked on over the years is a 5-year financial plan, and we update it each year and roll forward some of the things that we're not able to tick off on previous years. And if we were in a traditional situation going into the budget cycle with the numbers pretty firm and not all the overages that we've had associated with this pandemic, some of the positions that we were looking at were adding more innovation specialists at the elementary level, tech integration specialists at the high school and middle school, math specialists to do work similar that a reading specialist are doing at the elementary, a math coach from our 6 to 12 grade range, a world language teacher at the middle school, some money towards unified athletics at the high school, as well as just general instructional supplies that we're always trying to chip away at. So this year, typically we'd be looking at a financial plan of $488,000 of items that would allow us to continue to move forward. But because we know these are unique circumstances and we're trying to make sure that we can offset the cost of the overages that we've seen in FY21, we're not looking to push hard at these numbers just yet. Again, we'll be keeping an eye on the numbers throughout the spring, and if we're finding that number, that 3% increase will allow for us to take some of these items off the list, this will be up for discussion throughout the spring, and we'll continue to keep an eye on them. But at this time, we don't have them built into our number. Again, questions impacting our budget moving forward. COVID-19, again, Tom will talk maybe briefly about some of the monies that might be coming forward from the federal stimulus. Governor's budget just came out, and that has an impact on all the schools, obviously all the communities. Circuit breaker, where we stand there, how much we have to spend this year to offset the FY21 deficit, as well as what we receive next year. State and federal grants, again, that's kind of tied into the COVID-19 as well, not just some of the ongoing grants, but there's other grant dollars that are available to help us with some of these new costs that we've had to endure. Local revenue forecast is something that's always up in the air at times. They have a good idea where it is, but that changes sometimes. Contract negotiations, we have some of our larger contracts that are up for negotiation this year, so that'll have an impact on the number, as well as any changes in our special education and student service costs, as well as enrollment. Enrollment's always one that we can either make some gains in if the numbers are going down, but we could also see that we have to increase it based on any increases in enrollment. And then the next steps, like we traditionally do, we'll continue to meet as a leadership team to discuss and determine if any adjustments need to be made. The school committee will vote on a preliminary budget next week. Typically, this would have been read last week's meeting, but on the 19th, we have to present a preliminary number. That number can change all the way up to the floor of the town meeting in the spring. We will continue to meet with Mr. Maresco and Mr. Della Russo as a financial team and look if there's any changes on going either way. The budget subcommittee will meet and review the target number as we move forward. Budget and district goals will be discussed at school committee meetings over the next 4 months. If there's any changes to the direction that we're heading, obviously we're going to start that discussion here with you folks. There'll be meetings later on with the advisory board, the board of selectmen, to discuss both not only our operating costs, but our operating budgets, but our capital budgets as well. And then we will make a final vote prior to town meeting on April 6th. That's when we have our hearing, our budget hearing for the public, and we'll make any changes there if need be. But if not, if we have the same number there, we will vote that at that time. And then annual town meeting will be Monday, April 26th into Tuesday the 27th. And that's a quicker version than typical, but I think this year we know that there's a lot of things that we're able to do this year and a lot of things that we had to do based on COVID and put us in a position where locking in that 3% number with the town was really important to us. So we had some stability as we put the budget together and knowing that our costs are going to be covered. And again, as I've said before a couple times already, if we can expand upon that and tackle any of those items on our financial plan, I would love to do it, but we have to be conservative here and make sure that we can cover our costs first. Ms. Miller, anything I leave out there?
No, I think you pretty much hit every point there. Just as this school year is absolutely a school year that we've never experienced before. This is certainly a budget cycle that in my 14 years of budgets that we've never experienced before. There's just so many unknowns. Unknowns moving into next fiscal year and even unknowns this fiscal year. So as Mr. Granatino alluded to, we're working on developing a number for our closeout for this fiscal year, this school year. Right now, we have about a $1.7 million deficit due to COVID and everything we've done on that front. We did receive the $500,000 in free cash at special town meeting, so that will be put towards that deficit. As I alluded to at the beginning of the meeting and information, the federal stimulus money, right now we're projected to receive, if all goes according to plan, about 1.1 million. So that money as a one-time revenue will really put a dent in that deficit. And with that, we potentially down the road could actually look at some of those financial plan items. But really this year is just trying to get our house in order. The circuit breaker piece is really really a big component of this. We don't have any information yet on circuit breaker funding for next fiscal year. The state has come out and given a pretty decent picture as far as Chapter 70 goes. We're pretty much in line with our previous years, but the circuit breaker normally falls to about 72 to 75% reimbursement on our out-of-district students, and a significant hit to that could be a potential game changer as far as funding for fiscal 22. Our contracts, our clerical contract is set for next year. That's our only contract right now. Right now, our salaries are $44 million of our $51 million budget. So that's obviously it's really staffing and salaries that make up the majority of the budget projection. So like Mr. Granatino said, budget subcommittee, this year is kind of a backwards process. We received our number from the town. So we are very fortunate that we received that number from the town, and hopefully that goes all according to plan next week at the selectmen's meeting, and we can get to April with that 3% increase, because that's going to go a long ways to stabilizing our finances. And I think that's pretty much it. A lot more information to come, obviously. You will end up getting, it might not be a big binder, but it'll be, you will get some paperwork once it all starts to come together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller and Mr. Granatino. Any questions or comments from the committee at this time? Yes, Ms. Campbell.
Mr. Miller, will the binder be color coded like always?
Of course it will.
You know I love a good color coded binder.
Thanks.
That adds another 0.35% to the budget to do that, but we'll do it for you, Ms. Campbell.
Those little index tabs cost about $5.99, so I think we can afford that.
Any further questions or comments from the committee?
We'll obviously be discussing this more next week as well, if there's any follow-up questions that folks have between now and then. So
beautiful. What I can't understand is how we went from having 90 people on the Zoom to only 40 when we started talking about the budget. I don't know why people would drop out that
43.
Very appreciative of you, Mr. Miller and Mr. Granatino, and to the town too. I mean, I think a lot of other towns and cities in Massachusetts are in a lot worse shape budget-wise than Marshfield right now. And we have a lot to be thankful for with our working relationship with the town, and the fact that they've stepped forward to make sure that we at least have these level funds. So that says a lot about the relationship with the town and the commitment that the town has.
I would just add that many of our neighboring towns throughout this past year, since back to March, have had to either put folks on leave, have had to lay off outright, have had to make some really serious changes to staffing, and we've been fortunate to be able to keep where we're at with our staffing, both in the classroom and within our support teams. All of our ancillary folks who are working throughout the district, we've been able to keep them in place, which has been great. And that's because of a lot of the work the town side has done with us.
And it's also because of the work that you and Mr. Miller do. So thank you both
Thank
for
you.
that, and your building principals and your administrative team for helping keep the ship steady. Okay, we will move on from that agenda item. And we have a couple sets of minutes, both from the same meeting to review. We will go over first the December 8th, 2020 meeting minutes. We'll give the committee just a few moments to review those before we accept a motion to approve those from Mrs. Pazurski. And the chair will accept a recommendation or a motion. Yes, Mr. Greer. Nope. Can you unmute yourself? I think it's just because you missed the roll call, which is understandable. I think you had traffic. Oh, that's a good question. So it might just be an issue of Mr. Greer during the roll call. Well, I would just say abstain because he wasn't here because of traffic until 7:10. I think you walked in. Yeah, that's a good catch, Mr. Greer. So yes, I would just change it to abstain, arrived at 7:10. Because as it said, it notes above that the meeting was called to order at 7:05. So good catch. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Chair will accept the motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 8th, 2020, once everybody has had a chance. Is there such a motion? So moved from Mr. Greer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Boyd. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand, saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, that's 5-0-0. Mrs. Pazurski, thank you. Executive session meeting minutes from that same date, December 8th. And once the committee has had a chance to sufficiently review this, we'll accept a motion to approve and release, which would be a roll call vote.
So moved.
So moved from Ms. Boyd. Is there a second? Second from Mr. Greer, sitting next to me here. Mrs. Pazurski, if you could call the roll on that one.
Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Ms. Boyd,
Yes.
Mrs. Campbell,
Yes.
Mrs. Brady.
Yes.
That's 5-0-0. Thank you very much. Okay, folks. Well, it looks like we have another meeting a week from tomorrow. So we will be together once again, if virtually, on the 19th. And that is our public hearing on the budget as well. So would encourage folks who may have comments on the school committee budget to join us at that. You will join, if you do choose to speak in the budget hearing, you will join the elite ranks of one Heidi Church, who I believe is the only person to speak as a member of the public in our budget hearings in the last 4 or 5 years. So certainly welcome anybody who wishes to address the committee at that point. That all being said, does anybody have a motion to adjourn? So moved from Mr. Greer. Is there a second? Second from Ms. Boyd. Roll call, Mrs. Pazurski.
Mr. Greer,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Ms. Boyd,
Yes.
Mrs. Brady.
Yes.
I couldn't hear. And Mrs. Campbell.
Yes.
Wonderful. That's 5-0-0. We're adjourned at 7:31 p.m. Thank you very much, folks.